Hey, welcome to the New Home Insights podcast by John Burns Real Estate Consulting. I'm Dean Worley, your host. Each episode, we're going to bring you some of the best minds in the housing business talking about some fascinating topics or trend or innovation or issue, just like the one you're about to listen to. Enjoy. Welcome to the New Home Insights podcast. I'm your host, Dean Worley. Our guest today is Kirsten Jordan. Kirsten is something of a groundbreaker. She is the first female star of the Bravo TV show $1 Million Listing in New York. She's one of the top real estate agents in Manhattan. So that makes her a very big fish in, I think, the biggest of ponds. And she does this while being the mom of 3 kids. Kirsten, first, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I don't have anything else to add to that. I mean, I've been in the business for 13 years. I love what I do, and I'm really excited about this next season of $1 Million Listing in New York. It was my first season, and it took me a year and a half to shoot it. So everybody else has been doing it for almost 2 years. It took them almost 2 years to film the entire thing. So it has been epic, and we are making history.
And it starts on May 6th, and it's in the can. It's ready to go. You can't tell us obviously any spoilers, obviously, but it's in there. It's ready.
Yeah, it's ready, and I think the world's ready for it.
Yeah, I hope so. So let's touch on that. Let's start with that. You're the first woman to lead that show, and I think this is the 9th season. How is that possible? I'm not asking that. I mean, that seems crazy. In a place like New York, there are tons of incredibly good brokers that are female in New York City. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, it must be the $1 million question, because I know that women have tried out over the years, because I know some of them, and I don't know why I was picked and why this timing happened this way. I do know, though, that I bring a lot to the table. I have a lot of broker relationships. I've been doing this for a long time. You have the intrigue of watching a working mom balance it all. And then there's also this aspect of, I would say, an approachability aspect, which I think is going to be fun for everybody, because what you see is what you get. I don't have a lot of boundaries in general. Which is it's very expensive for therapy, but very good for reality TV.
That does save you some cash, doesn't it? The way home prices are going, though, what is this measly $1 million listing? Shouldn't it be $10 million listing in New York maybe pretty soon?
I know it should be much more. I think when it started, though, $1 million listing, I think for the rest of the country was still kind of a fun kind of idea. And it did start in LA. That was the first franchise.
Yeah, that's true. So, but still, 10 years on, it might need some update.
True. It might need to be multi-million-dollar listing.
Multi-million-dollar listing at least. So I'm gonna do some fanboy questions real quick here, kind of like, who's your most famous client? You don't have to name that person, but you have to describe them in such a way that it'll be obvious to everyone who it is.
My most famous client that I've ever worked with, let's see. Well, it depends. I worked with somebody who is a major actor.
Oh, come
redhead.
on. Okay, De Niro.
Okay, redheaded De Niro.
Oh, sorry.
And big in the world of like the Oscars and all of that, and I'll leave it at that. And that was really a very, very great learning experience for me, I would say. That was probably my first time delving into what it's like dealing with the media, which is something I'm learning a lot about now, and something I didn't know anything about. I think it was 6 years ago when I did that sale.
I'm going to say Nicole Kidman, because it's not that guy from CSI, because he's not big in the Oscar world. I can't think of his name. David Caruso. It's not Caruso, who, by the way, I believe is like 5'2". Am I wrong?
Probably. I mean, listen, I think what I've realized is that some of the only tall actors seem to be the stars on the $1 Million Listing show, because I feel like not the ones in LA, but the ones in New York, the guys are just tall. Like Frederick and Ryan are big. They are tall guys.
Okay. Yep. Have you had an infamous client? And you can start with Scott Rudin.
I would say that the most how do you say it? Those
Infamous?
that kind of infamous, the
Yeah.
infamous clients. We did some of these U.S. Marshal repossessions at the beginning of my
Ah,
career, and that those people were all infamous. I at the time didn't really know who they were, but it was always really fascinating because you'd go inside of these homes and it was like they had left by night, and sometimes it would
wow.
still there would still be all the clothing would be there, photos, and that I would say that's what infamous feels like, I guess, is when it
Yeah.
you walk in someplace and it's a whole time capsule. And usually those places take months to hit the US Marshals, so they'd been
Yeah.
sitting for a long time too.
Wow. So their musty shoulder pad suits are just hanging in the
Yeah.
clset.
Yeah,
Damn, I
and
hadn't thought about
photos of them with ex-presidents everywhere.
that. That is pretty infamous. I was thinking more like cancel
Yeah.
culture, kind of thing, but that's serious prison infamous. I like that.
Yeah. White collar.
How let's talk about how you do business. How analytical do you get? Are you a data person? Do you keep up with pricing trends and things like that really minutely? And do you use that when you kind of arrive at the logic of what a listing should be for?
Well, there is a lot of analysis that needs to go into pricing property in Manhattan, period. And a lot of that analysis doesn't just necessarily come from closed data. It does also come from contract data, and that comes from broker relationships. So I would say that's where I think I have a strength. It's that calling other agents, getting the data of what something's gone into contract for, or at least around that number, because that's how you get to real time data. That's why the Olshan report, which is the luxury report that comes out weekly, is just something that's so widely watched by
Hmm.
brokers because it shows real time velocity and real time activity. So I would say, from an analytical perspective, we have to be analytical. Am I a super granular person? No, I am very big picture, and everything I do I look at from a very big picture perspective. But apartment by apartment, there's no way of getting away from analysis.
Do you even dig into weeds like, I don't know, like demographics or something? Will you look at those to try to get a feel for a neighborhood or how a neighborhood is transitioning, anything like that?
I would say most of the time, with apartments that we are pricing, the neighborhoods that I work in, there's direct comps that are usually nearby, and so it really is based on most recent sales. We usually don't spend a lot of time on macro unless we're underwriting something that will be selling in the future. And for the developers that are listening, they know what that feels like. You're trying to understand what the future is going to be, and that's the crystal ball numbers. Like, what are we going to sell these apartments for in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So do you sometimes, I don't know, you hear interior designers talk a lot about when they look at pieces, they have the story of that piece, the history of that piece. Do you ever think about that in terms of that apartment you're trying to sell?
Well, I recently sold it was Nelson Rockefeller's apartment. And I would say that was a very unique sale because of the fact that the apartment, it was historical, because he actually bought the apartment because he had owned he owned more than one floor in the building next door. And so as that a building was going up on Fifth Avenue, he decided to buy that floor so it could basically match the lowest floor of the apartment that he had in the other building, which, by the way, you could never do now. And he broke through and had like a couple of steps to come down to
Uh,
this particular apartment. So when we sold that last year, it was the kind of sale that the history was a huge part of everything, because the person who is the architect who did all the design on the interiors, a lot of those details were still there and were very Art Deco. And I think the
mm.
current the owner now probably will rip all of it out. But there were people who actually were interested in the details and the history and understanding why they had done that, those details of the apartment.
That is interesting. I guess you can turn that lemon into lemonade, right? I've seen the show. I saw one of them. I did my research, and it was something I think I think it was from just last season, and they turned this Miami Vice '80s unit with the decor thoroughly just attuned to that somewhat older lawyer gentleman, and he threw a big Miami Vice kind of a party and tried to find that person who loves the '80s kind of a thing. That was smart, I thought. So you
Yeah,
would
I
you
mean,
would do that?
we didn't have the chance for that one property that I because of the fact that it sold really quickly. And I think it was well priced, and it had a tremendous amount of activity on it. It was also the right price for that particular apartment at the time. Very unique terraced views, a relatively, I would say, middle of the road co-op for for Fifth Avenue standards. So from the perspective that it was something that was a building that you didn't necessarily need to be a Rockefeller to buy there.
So if you get a really old unit, you'll have to get one of those big front wheel bicycles and just turn into like a turn of the century kind of a vibe, and find that
Yeah.
person that.
I there's a lot of opportunity, I would say, to do that. The only problem is a lot of these really historical apartments are in these Park Avenue co-op buildings, and they are not as excited about you doing creative, silly things on TV with the apartment.
Yeah. Okay. Is money? I mean, again, prices have gone kind of nuts lately. Do you deal with a sector of your clientele where it's not a money thing at all? Money is not really the price is not really the consideration.
Yeah, I would say that in the world of well, specifically the world of Hamptons rentals,
Mhm.
I would say that area seems to have right now no real price limit. I think there's something that just rented for like $2 million for the summer or something like that, or something crazy out in the Hamptons. And we have a particular buyer right now like that who is interested in Hamptons rentals, and we're talking about $100,000 to $200,000 a month, for the month of August for something quality in Southampton, which, by the way, isn't that easy to find. So that's where we're seeing I would say that's where we're seeing, like, tell me what it costs and I'll do it, because it's really quite the luxury, experiential asset instead of just the purchase.
In that luxury sector, then, when sometimes when it's not cost, or even when it is cost, is a consideration, but not the consideration. What are those key considerations then? Those key things that allow you to find that right house for that right client?
Well, New Yorkers care a lot about, New Yorkers care a lot about their job. They care a lot about who they know and where they're seen, and all of that. And then there's the schools, clearly, for a lot of the people who live in New York. So I think I'm a big fan of convenience. I live on the Upper West Side. For me, that location works very well because of convenience, because of schools, because of what I need for myself. So I think that thinking about convenience is super important. Your cost of taxis and Ubers and getting around is a big piece of things. And I think that's important to think about. The other thing that's important to think about is your relative carry, what it really costs to carry these assets. Because the truth is the costs usually don't go down. And that is a really important thing to think about, because a lot of these,
Yeah.
carrying costs can already start out high and then they get higher.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I think is really important to think about. And then the other part of it is really the ability of resale and what the asset looks like to a buyer for the future. So if you think it's something you're easily going to be able to get out of, for various reasons, and some of these buildings that are the most difficult buildings still seem to be pretty liquid in general, as of recent, they do very well as long as the asset's been kept up very, very well. So it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be in a building where it's a super flexible building from a resale perspective, but for whatever reason you feel confident about the resale potential of the asset.
Are you getting more of that investor who are thinking almost more that resale potential in 3 years than they are about living there in these ensuing 3 years?
There's a lot of investors out there that are coming in to try to get deals. There's not a ton of deals left. A lot of developers have deep pockets and are holding firm, on some of these assets. And then the stuff that's turnkey, that's easy to buy, that's resale, really has absorbed very, very quickly.
Okay.
So it's not so easy right now to get such a deal. But in some pockets, if you're willing to be a little more flexible about neighborhood, there's still opportunity.
Are there those little tiny things, that idiosyncratic things that we don't think about, like this is near my important a subway stop, or this is really walkable to my favorite restaurant? Do you have those things that'll enter into the discussion?
I mean, I think for the luxury buyer, there has
Yeah.
to be something that feels like you arrived. For me, it was having river views and having really high ceilings and architectural details. Like, to me, that's arriving.
Mm.
Having the doorman, having those details, feeling like it's a big, spacious space that we have that has light and air is super important for me. Whereas I have other buyers that specifically want to be in a few block radius, either in the West Village or they want to be in that couple block radius on the Upper East Side on Park, all of that, which does make sense because you know what?
Mm.
You're spending a certain amount of money. It is nice to be able to walk to, Bill Bouquet if that's what you want, or further uptown, some of those other really hot spots in the 80s.
So not to stereotype New Yorkers, but yeah, perception is big. I mean, that like you've arrived. Is it very frequent that your clients are making a statement and want to consciously make a statement with their purchase?
Um, Definitely. What's been really interesting recently is with the rise of Brooklyn as being a place that's now really on the map for a larger pool of buyers. I would say that's made people even be able to say, "Hey, if I can't buy the townhouse of my dreams for $7 million in Manhattan, I'll take a look in Brooklyn because I'll get something really special for $7 million in Brooklyn." So yes, I think that people are thinking about how to feel like I've arrived, and they're getting more geographically agnostic, not completely, but they are somewhat. So there's
Mhm.
that as an idea. And then, but the more luxury, the larger the purchase, the more the cachet matters. And New York still has a social caste system. It is what it is, and you just can't ignore it when you're dealing with these luxury buyers that want to feel like they bought into a club, a private club.
So Brooklyn's popped. Is Staten Island next?
I don't know
Sorry.
about Staten Island. I would say, I mean, maybe, but I think Queens is really doing really well as well. We're seeing a ton of activity there. So, and that's really easy from like a subway perspective. So I think that's probably where we're going to see the most, how do you say it? The most, probably the most transition in the short term.
That does make sense. I was kidding about Staten Island. Queens makes a lot of sense. Poor Staten Island.
Queens
I'm sorry.
does. I don't know. It's what it is.
Are your clients often driven by just pure emotion? They have that connection, that click when they see the space, and they have to have it. Does that happen?
I would say that that's the most frequent with finance people because they are
Mhm.
so focused on their spreadsheets that then when they actually become emotionally attached to a property that they've seen, they know how to like adjust the numbers so that their spreadsheet works. Whereas they also know how to adjust the numbers when they don't like something, which I find happens a lot with these, like with married couples, where like when the husband's not on board, he's like, listen, I can't make the spreadsheet work for that. And then when all of a sudden the husband finds the apartment that he loves, it's like all of a sudden he makes those micros work and the spreadsheet works. So now we can buy it. So I don't believe in anybody's that's buying a residential property for their primary use that there's no emotion in it. I just don't believe that.
Okay, that makes sense. And you kind of anticipated my next question, which is, do you also have those just super anal? Absolutely, they've studied the hell out of the market and they know what they want and how much it should cost. You get a lot of that.
Well, yeah, it's happening more and more. Everybody's an expert, and
Yeah.
they think that they're an expert because they've spent so much time online looking at all of the comparables and all the things that have sold, and they're quicker to the trigger than the brokers are sometime, which is giving us all a run for our money, but it's also great because it's raising the bar for agents and it's making us more focused and it's making us have to adapt to what it's going to take to get ahead of these buyers because we still do provide value to them because they aren't brokers and they don't have the experience we have. It's just sometimes, yeah, I have brokers who I'm just like, could you? I mean, sorry, I have buyers who I think to myself, like, why don't you just become a real estate agent? Like, who are we kidding? This you love this more than I do.
Yeah, that I can see that. I mean, we have that. I'm based in Northern California, and we hear a lot from sales agents at just normal price points that their buyers they all think they know exactly how much that home should cost. They've studied the hell out of it. They've run the numbers. They've done it. They've done
Right.
regressions on it, and that's become very common. Let's talk about the future of the luxury market and your market. I mean, I often have my guests look into their crystal ball. You're no exception. What do you think? Where do you see the luxury sector in New York going over these next year or two?
Well, I think we have to start with the fact that there is a lot of liquidity in the market. And, on some level, people at the very luxury level do view these trophy kind of pied-à-terre apartments as kind of like a baseball card trading kind of idea. It's like, what's the most exclusive apartment in a specific building? And it kind of trades, especially these condominiums, it does kind of trade between these billionaires. And so I view the luxury market as having a large rebound. And I think that there are some buildings that are really, really strong that are going to capture those buyers. If you just saw the other day, there was I think it was a duplex that traded at 220 Central Park South for 33 million, which is over $10,000 a square foot, if I'm not mistaken. And that wasn't even on the market for very long. It was like, and it's because it's a unique asset. There's nothing else in the building, and that's a big trade to have happen very, very quickly, and that just shows you the resilience for these trophy unique assets that don't trade frequently in the top buildings.
Well, sometimes or even frequently, will those be like this isn't just their primary residence or even their secondary. This is their place for when they're in the city twice a year, kind of
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's where there's a lot of Texans that I've spoken to that have gotten places in or had gotten places in Manhattan before the pandemic. So I feel like we're seeing a little bit less of them right now
Mhm.
because they've also detoured to Florida a little bit. A lot of them are doing the whole, what is it, Park City kind of thing, or one of these islands, like an Anguilla things, those kinds
Mhm.
of, but listen, they've done very, very well in Texas. And what's more exciting than having some really nice places to go with your many children to, enjoy real estate and then the weather.
With a cowboy hat and spurs, I'm assuming,
Right. Totally.
per the stereotype. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, Texas. Is there so let's just pretend though that the market does kind of let's say it's 3 years from now, 4 years from now, and things are slowing down. Does the luxury sector get hit first, get hit last? Is there typically a trend specific to your niche?
I would say that the luxury sector definitely gets hit first as things correct. I think we saw that between the 2017 to 2020. There was a lot of overbuilding for these really big, beautiful, ultra luxury homes with the 100th floor ballroom, like with Central Park Tower. And in the end, 220 Central Park South, I believe, sold out before things had, well, no, they actually sold out while things were in mid correction, I would say. So
Mhm.
they still did well because it was just so special, which is the same way that we're seeing with, there's another project that's a Naftali project that's on between 79th and 80th on Madison Avenue. Same thing, sold out. Nobody even blinked at pricing for $10 million plus units
Wow.
because of the fact that the developer is very, very well known and stands behind the product. So I would say that the luxury sector, when there's a lot of froth, that's
Mhm.
the stuff that gets hit first. But the product where the developer is really well known, it's boutique and it's small, and there's a unique aspect to it that you can't replicate. Those are the buildings that I do think just perform regardless of the market.
So those almost unique's a grossly overused word, but those uncommon, those infrequent kind of opportunities should
Right.
hold.
Then they lean into that private club feeling of saying, there's a select number of people that can afford this, and we're going to make it so nice that it really is it's a private buyers club.
Historically, that high-end market has a much higher days on market. It could be hundreds of days for some of these $1 million apartments to turn. Has the market gotten hot enough where that's no longer true? Where you're getting these really short days on markets and things are getting snapped up very quickly?
Well, there are some new units like the one I said at 220 Central Park South that came on and absorbed quickly. It was at the right price, probably for where it needed to trade. Unique asset, only one of its kind in the building that was available. Other kinds of buildings that now are competing against assets that didn't exist before. That's where the days on market are still going to are still going to be where they are right now. For example, the post-war buildings on Central Park South that, are dated and need full renovations, those are the situations where it's a little bit more difficult to say, hey, this is just everything's selling, so this is just gonna sell. And that is still going to probably have a little bit of time before the other inventory around it that is new and has the same views and, absorbs, so that then theirs can absorb at a relative discount.
That makes sense. Let's switch gears a little bit. Do you track design trends in the luxury market? Those must-haves, or I can't even think, a lamp designed by Yoko Ono. I made that up. But are those little funky design trends something you track and take advantage of or use when you're selling a home?
Well, I would say we take advantage of it from the perspective of knowing what's in and what's out, and being able to advise our sellers on what we think they should keep in their home, what we think they should take out. But we also do outsource to the experts. I think we all work with stagers, we all work with designers, making sure that they can help with advising the client about what they need to do, because frankly, that's something that I'm still not an expert in. I have an eye. I know what I like, but still, it's like, it's like knowing when bolognese sauce tastes good. I know when it tastes good, but not everybody can tell you why and what else you need to add to make it taste good. And that's the same with design.
Are to keep up, because like they can literally turn in a few weeks. Go, no, that's very passe now. That's
True.
done.
And especially with new developments, the issue is you have to pick these finishes sometimes a couple years before you're actually selling. And that becomes difficult because the trends do move really quickly, which is where the expensive building and making sure that you don't cut corners really is important, because at least if it's well done, then usually it's timeless.
Yeah. Is that bamboo? That was Tuesday. I'm sorry. Tear that up.
Yeah, exactly. Or the pummeled nickel, or the there's all kinds of stuff.
Pummeled nickel. I like that. Mike Tyson, I believe, invented that. I think. I could be wrong. Do any of your clients want what they absolutely can't have? Like they just watched Blade Runner 2049 on Netflix, so they insist on having like one of those moving hologramic significant others around the house. Do they really just get me X, and you have to tell them X doesn't exist?
Well, if you think about it, every New Yorker has like an aspirational list of stuff that they want that they can't have. And most people right now are like, yeah, and it'd be a really big bonus if I could have outdoor space. And you're like, well, with what you're planning on spending and how many bedrooms you want, if you don't want to sleep outside on the terrace, you're probably not going to have outdoor space, because that's the thing that everybody's looking for right now, is maybe having this outdoor space bonus. So I would say that's probably more as far as like other weird asks. I have a client that wants to have an arc trainer in the gym in the building, and a specific brand of arc trainer. I think that's the only one that there is the arc trainer or whatever it is, but he wants that one. Yeah. And so he has to figure out a way that they could also have that trainer in the gym.
You're going to have to hire your own, it sounds like.
Yep.
So I'm going to pitch my show to you for Bravo. Are you ready? It's called Straight Eye for the Queer Guys. Hear me out. I teach them to lose their fashion sense and to be intolerant of cultural change. And every episode ends with me having them like wearing cargo pants in a brew pub and spilling dark beer on their really scraggly, unkempt beards. Yes or no? Go.
I feel like it's going to be hilarious. I love it. I love it. Yeah. But I feel like it also has to go with a location change. Like you got to bring them to a place where like, this is like the norm, and this is what's cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I like that. North Dakota. We'll do that. Or someplace in Minnesota, something, I don't know, something like that.
I know.
Kirsten, thank you. You gave us a lesson in the luxury market, especially in New York, but I think a lot of those things can translate to any luxury market in the country. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. And I hope that you all tune in on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on May 6th for my debut. And if you're listening to this after that, keep tuning in for the next 16 weeks, because that's how many episodes we have.
On Bravo. And you can even do the on-demand, because that's how I watched some old episodes. So do that.
Yeah,
too.
It's on Apple TV. It's on Peacock. It's on Hey You, which is out there in a bunch of other countries. It's everywhere.
I appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.